Hey everyone, and welcome as we continue our study through the New Testament, looking at the 250 events in the life of Jesus. Today we're looking at the religious leaders plotting to kill Jesus, and they're doing this after we've been looking at the death and resurrection of Lazarus the last few days, and they're doing that after that. So we're going to pick this up in verse 45, and we're going to go through verse 57. It says, verse 5, many of the people who were with Mary believed in Jesus when they saw this happen, and some went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. The leading priests and Pharisees called the high council together. What are we going to do? They asked each other. This man certainly performs many miraculous signs. They admit that he performs miraculous signs, even raising people from the dead. If we allow him to go on like this, soon everyone will believe in him. Then the Roman Empire will come and destroy both our temple and our nation. We're going to look at that here in a minute. Caiaphas, who was the high priest at the time, said, "You don't know what you're talking about. You don't realize that it's better for you that one man should die for the people than for the whole nation to be destroyed." He's prophesying. And John writes about this in 51. He did not say this on his own. As high priest at the time, he was led to prophesy that Jesus would die for the entire nation, and not only for the nation, but to bring together and unite all the children of God scattered around the world. So we picked this up in verse 53. So from that time on, the Jewish leaders began to plot Jesus' death because they felt it was better for him to die than for the Roman Empire to come in and take him over and destroy their temple. As a result, Jesus stopped his public ministry among the people and left Jerusalem. He went to a place near the wilderness to the village of Ephraim and stayed there with his disciples. And so he left. He goes away for a while, and then he waits until now the Jewish Passover. We're going to look at it. It was now almost time for the Jewish Passover celebration, and many people from all over the country arrived in Jerusalem several days early so they could go through the purification ceremony before Passover began. There was a lot of rituals they had to go through. They kept looking for Jesus, but as they stood around the temple, they said to each other, "What do you think? He won't come for Passover, will he?" And meanwhile, the leading priests and Pharisees had publicly ordered that anyone seeing Jesus must report it immediately so that they could arrest him. And so we're getting closer and closer to his crucifixion. So as we look at this here, right, we see, again, the religious leaders plot to kill Jesus, even when confronted with the point blank power of Jesus's deeds, they still refuse to believe. They still refuse to believe that Jesus was right. These eyewitnesses not only rejected it, then they plotted his murder. Like they're like, yeah, they admitted this man is performing miraculous signs. He's raising people from the dead. He's going to stir up the Romans, so we need to kill him. Now they used there was some validity to that a little bit because you know with that, right, if the there was an uprising and there was a lot of chaos or anything like that, the Roman Empire would come in and put a stop to it, and they did not want that to happen. But really, what they're protecting here is their power. They were more concerned about their power than they were anything else, and so they were so hardened that they preferred to reject God's Son rather than admit that they were wrong. They just wouldn't admit it, right? They were so self-righteous that they were not going to admit that this man could be the Messiah. And so they preferred closure instead of being open to who God was. And so we need to be aware of that kind of pride. And we can become very prideful humans. We can be very prideful people, and we will not drop that pride sometimes and see things for how they are. The Jewish leaders knew that if they didn't stop Jesus, the Romans would lash out against them. We talked about that, right? If they revolted, if they caused an uprising or anything like that, then yeah, the Roman Empire would come in. And Rome gave them, kind of partial freedom to the Jews, right? As long as they were quiet and obedient. As like they came in, they took over, conquered, and then they would give back certain freedoms as long as everything was in order, everything stayed in order. And so that was what that's what they were trying to keep that peace so that Rome didn't come in. But Jesus' miracles often caused a disturbance as they were, and you can imagine what kind of disturbance they saw with the rising of Lazarus. I mean, the man had been dead for 4 days in the ground, and he raises him from the dead. You can imagine, and there was a ton of people that witnessed this. It wasn't like, oh, Mary saw it, and there was a ton of eyewitnesses there that saw this happen. And so, the leaders did fear that Rome's displeasure would bring additional hardship to their nation. And again, there's truth to that. I understand it, but I still will point to the fact that they were more concerned about their power in this because they would lose their power, their authority, and things like that much more than anything. And so John then talks about Caiaphas' statement as a prophecy, and he prophesies that it's better for one man to die than for the whole nation to suffer, and so he was used by God to explain Jesus's death, though he didn't know that, he didn't realize what he was doing, right? He was setting that up to for basically to show exactly what was going to happen, and in the end, one man did die for the entire nation, for everyone, and that was part of this too. So not only did in their eyes did he die for their nation so that their whole nation wouldn't be attacked, he died, he also died for all of us so that our sins could be covered, and he died for all of our sins, and so that we see that. And so we see that Jesus is he pulls back until the Passover, and then we're going to get into, he's gonna resurface. I don't have a time frame on exactly how long he pulled back for, and it's because his time hadn't come. He was timing this perfect for when exactly he knew when he was going to be arrested. He knew when he wanted to be arrested, and when he wanted to have all this happen. So that's the way it played out, and he didn't want it to happen any sooner. So he was careful with this. But it's just interesting to see, and we have to be careful in this, and we have to be careful that our pride doesn't get to the point to where it's like, oh, we have the answer and we're 100% right on everything, and I'm not going to listen to anything. This is what the Pharisees did, and they missed Jesus for it. And I think sometimes in our churches we get that attitude, that very self-righteous attitude, and we miss Jesus for that. In a lot of cases, and so we need to be careful that we don't become like this and miss Jesus, and maybe even get to the point of attacking Jesus or being the opposite of what Jesus would want us to be, because we're being that way. And so we have to be very, very careful as we get into this. Next, tomorrow we're going to look at Jesus healing 10 men with leprosy. And we're getting back this, and again, we're getting closer and closer to Jesus is entering Jerusalem for the last time, marching towards his crucifixion, and that's kind of what he's doing now. He's slowly building up to that crucifixion. As always, I appreciate everyone for watching. I appreciate those who continue to share, who have subscribed. If you haven't subscribed, I ask you to do so. We're going to continue to produce different content like this, and make different videos and go into different series. But as always, I appreciate everyone for watching.